Okay, so now we're going to get into the Byzantine, which I'm going to divide into the early, middle, and late Byzantine and divide up the lectures accordingly. Okay, so first we're going to talk about the early Byzantine, which is from about 324 to about 726. Okay, so as you know from this class, we've gone through several phases where there's a golden phase, a golden era, a golden age of something, and then dark ages. And that kind of back and forth and like the rise and the collapse is something that we see throughout history, not just in art history, but in any history. So the golden age of the Byzantine is under a guy named Justinian. And we're going to talk about him soon, but first I want to look at a couple of things from the early Byzantine before Justinian. So, one of the things that happens when you have all these big changes, so the capital of Rome gets moved to a new city called Constantinople by Constantine. There's a new religion, which is Christianity. So one of the things that happens is trying to kind of ease people into change and get people interested in the new visual imagery of the new culture. Okay, so for example, here is a relief carving. It was part of a diptych, meaning two things that were together. And it's carved out of ivory, which we know is bad now. We don't want to kill elephants for their tusks, but at the time that was not a thing that people thought about, and ivory was very expensive and valuable. So this is from pre-Justinian, early Byzantine. And this is the Archangel Michael. So remember back in Egypt, when we were talking about pharaohs, and how the god Horus, the guy who was represented by a falcon sometimes, was the symbol of the living pharaohs, right? So the living king, the living pharaoh was kind of considered affiliated with Horus, that god specifically. Okay, in the Byzantine, similar thing. Archangel Michael, who's also a saint, is affiliated with the living emperor of the Byzantine Empire. So the emperors of the Byzantine, they're like special guy that kind of represents them is the Archangel Michael. Okay, so we know that. So we're going to see Archangel Michael a lot of things named after Michael, that kind of thing. He is what's called a patron saint. So different occupations, different vocations, different things have different Christian saints that they're affiliated with. And part of the reason behind that is because we're moving a whole group of people from a religion that had many different gods. So if you needed something like safe crossing of the sea, you would go and pray to Neptune, right? Because he was the Roman god of the sea. If you needed if you were building a new house and you wanted to bless your home, you would go and pray to Vesta because she's the goddess of the hearth and all things domestic, right? So they're used to that kind of format. So with Christianity, this whole one God thing, they're like, well, what do I do then if I need this or that? So we see a lot of patron saints who are specific to different vocations and different acts. And that starts developing in this time period and becomes a really big thing a little bit later when we get into like the Romanesque and Gothic periods. Okay, so Archangel Michael, patron saint of the Byzantine emperors. So they need an iconography, a visual representation of these figures that people will relate to. Descriptions of angels in the Judeo-Christian Bible don't look like this, okay? There are several different kinds of descriptions, but a lot of them are kind of terrifying, like these creatures with a bunch of different eyes and thousands of eyes and wings everywhere and stuff. So that's not gonna fly visually with these people. So they were like, okay, we need some visual cues that people understand and can latch onto. So in classic Greek iconography, there's a winged figure that is affiliated with the rulers and specifically with winning, and that is the figure of Nike, who, remember, is one of the personifications of Athena. Particularly, Nike is the winged victory. So when you're victorious in a battle in ancient Greek culture, the representation of that is this woman with wings wearing a toga and sandals. So who do we have? Archangel Michael. What is he wearing? This wrapped, kind of draped toga-like outfit, sandals, and he has wings. So people visually identify him and are like, okay, that looks like something I've seen before. That looks like this representation of this figure that means victory and positive things. Great. So we have kind of a reference to classical sculpture within the iconography of this figure from this new religion. The inscription on this reads, "Receive these gifts." And what is he holding? He's holding an orb with a cross on top of it. The orb is the symbol of the whole world, of the whole universe. So receive this gift is here, emperors of Byzantium, receive this gift of the whole world, which you will bring into your empire and bring into this new Christian religion. Here's a secular production from this time. This is the Vienna Dioscorides. So this guy, Dioscorides, was a Greek physician, and he made this book that was a catalog of all the medicinal herbs, so all the different herbs and plants that had medical properties. And so then it just gets copied over and over again because it's very valuable knowledge in the ancient world, how to treat ailments and things. So at this time, this is a 6th century copy. The original title of the book was De Materia Medici, which is the medicinal materials, basically, medicinal ingredients. And so this is a translation of that, and now that there are illustrated manuscripts on the rise, there's also all these wonderful illustrations of the plants in here. So this one's a blackberry bramble illustration, but all the way throughout you can see all of these carefully done illustrations and then explaining the medicinal properties of the book. The next page that I'm going to show you is the dedication page. So this was not copied, this was not part of the original, this was part of this particular copy, and it's a dedication page featuring this woman named Annika Juliana, and she's between magnanimity and prudence. So basically she was the daughter of the short-lived emperor of the West, Anaxius Olybrius. Remember when the empire is split into the East Roman Empire and the West Roman Empire, and the West kind of crumbles into all these warring factions. So she was in a pretty powerful position because her dad was the emperor of the West. And she uses that position of power and wealth to become a great patron of the arts. She had a church built in Honoratai in 512. She funded a domed church in Constantinople in 524, which was very influential to Emperor Justinian's design for Hagia Sophia, which we'll talk about in a minute. And she also commissioned lots of illuminated manuscripts, including this one. So on the dedication page, it's kind of interesting. If you look in the bottom kind of corner, so she's the central figure, and then at her feet, you can just kind of see their bottom sticking up in the air. There's someone bowing to her, and that figure is supposed to be gratitude of the arts. So the arts showing how much gratitude they have for her as a patron. So this is an example of a role that women take on during this period as patrons of the arts to really kind of preserve knowledge and fund these new visual languages, which is pretty cool. Okay, so let's talk about Justinian. The golden age of the Byzantine art is during Justinian's reign. So he did a lot of things. He rules from 527 to 565. He drives the Ostrogoths out of Italy, so they had kind of taken back ground in Italy. He drives them out with his generals, who are Belisarius and Narses are his two big he's the emperor, his big generals who help drive all these people out. He expels the Vandals from northern Africa and reclaims that for Rome. He beats back the Bulgars and the Sasanians in the north and east. And in Constantinople, he puts down the Nika revolt of 532. So he's very good at ruling and keeping and driving out conflict. So he does a lot of fighting and work to create a era of stability after he defeats all these people. He also, the codification of the Roman law happens under him. So Roman law hadn't really been like written out before, but we have the Corpus Juris Civilis written at this time, which becomes the foundation of modern Europe, basically. Theodosius, who was the guy who came right after Constantine, makes Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire, but Justinian made it the only legal religion. So he basically says that not only is Christianity legal, as it has been for a while, so Constantine made it legal, Theodosius makes it the official religion of the Byzantine Empire, and then Justinian comes along and makes all other religions illegal. So he says you have to be a Christian if you live in my empire, and if you're found practicing anything else, it's punished by the law, which is pretty problematic, right? We don't like that. Religious freedom is good, okay? So he comes in and says this. He also believes in a particular kind of Christianity, which is Orthodox Christianity, which says that there is an equality of the aspects of God. So in Christianity, even though it's one God, it has three kind of components. So there's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So God the Father, Jesus Christ, and then the Holy Spirit are three aspects of God, but they're one person. It's sort of confusing. So that particularly is Justinian's belief. Okay, let's look at this picture of Justinian. So this is a ivory carving, and it's from the mid-6th century. It's now in the Louvre in Paris. You can see it there. Art from this period is called Justinianic, okay? So it gets named after him because he's such a big influence. This piece was once part of a collection of work that included the Barberini faun, which one of you wrote about when we were talking about Rome, which is why this is called the Barberini ivory, because it was part of the same collection of work. He, in this, is using a lot of interesting iconography. So the lowest panel is supposed to show the bountiful earth. So you have people with grain, people with lots of things that they've harvested, lots of different animals, including some exotic animals. So that's supposed to represent that the earth is bountiful and fertile, and also show his conquest. So we have a lion, an elephant, and a tiger from Africa and Asia, respectively, both sites of conquest that he has achieved. So they're supposed to represent that. We also have someone, a barbarian, recoiling in fear from the horse. We have a palm bearing the winged victory flying to crown Justinian. So that's okay. So that's in the left panel. So you can see the little bitty representation of Nike, the winged victory, coming in with a laurel wreath to crown him. We have the Roman soldier carrying a victory statuette, which is the winged victory again. We have his source of strength depicted in the top panel, which is these two angels holding a youthful depiction of Christ, okay? So this is all part of the symbology of his reign and what's important to him. One of the things that he is most known for in terms of the art and architectural history aspect is creating this building. This is Hagia Sophia. It's a very famous building. It's probably the most famous Byzantine era building. Hagia Sophia means holy knowledge or holy wisdom. Justinian commissioned 30 churches to be built, so he was a big patron of Christianity and of churches. This particular one kind of defines a lot of Byzantine style in architecture. It is a central plan church, but it is not round, so it's kind of a variation on the central plan. It's built by Anthemius of Tralles and Miletus, who were a mathematician and a physicist respectively, but they were also, very into architecture and building, obviously. Justinian wanted to surpass the Temple of Solomon, the dimensions of which he believed were 270 feet long, 240 feet wide. So he made his Hagia Sophia in those dimensions slightly bigger. The dome has a diameter of 108 feet, and the whole thing is 180 feet high. So it's very, very large. in scale, the largest dome made at this time. He thought that light was very important, so you'll notice on the dome, this is the first fenestrated dome that we've seen, meaning there's windows all the way along the bottom edge that let light in. We also have the clerestory windows that let lots of light in. We don't have an oculus in the dome, the ceiling is closed. Everything is mosaic and is gilded mosaic, so there's gold on all of the little tiles. And the tiles are set, the mosaic tiles are set in such a way that they're slightly off kilter so that light will bounce around on them more. So they're set at slightly different angles instead of totally flat to make everything sparkle. The idea here is basically that the light is kind of a representation of God, okay? So letting light in is very important, and having it sparkle all around shows God's presence in the church, essentially. A philosopher who wrote at the time, his name was the Pseudo-Dionysius, said, light comes from the good and light is the visual image of God. And that was a very popular thought at this time. So we see a lot of emphasis on light being let into churches in the Byzantine era. So this is a domed basilica, but it's not totally in the basilica format. It's a little bit more square. Okay, so here are the names of the architects that I mentioned that were a mathematician and a physicist, I believe. The halo of light is what sometimes the fenestration, the windows under the dome are referred to. The pendentives were used to transfer the weight from the dome to the piers so that there could be all those windows. The pendentives are this kind of like curving, they're like curved triangles kind of that hold the dome up. And the huge exterior buttresses are a later addition to keep it from collapsing later. So here you can see how the floor plan and everything works. So it is kind of basilica in form. We have an apse at the back, we have a naos or nave in the center, we have aisles, but it's not quite totally square, but it's much more square. It's a shorter kind of rectangle than we see in typical basilica plans. We do have a double narthex, so we have the inner and outer narthex and a forecourt. Okay, so there you can see the squinches versus the pendentives. So the pendentives allow all of those windows to exist by supporting the central dome. Here's just another image of that. It's pretty incredible. Okay, this is going a little longer than I wanted it to go, but that's okay. So in Ravenna in 493, Theodoric is the Ostrogoth king that has made Ravenna his capital. He chooses Ravenna as the capital because it had previously been the capital of the Western Roman Empire. In 539, Justinian's general Belisarius captures Ravenna and takes it back from the Ostrogoth king. For 2 centuries, it is the Eastern Empire's foothold in Italy, so it's kind of their spot that the Byzantine Empire is still holding on to in Italy. San Vitale is a central planned church in Ravenna, Italy, that's built at this time. It is very heavily adorned, lots and lots and lots of mosaics. We have in the apse, the circular part, the half dome at the back, the apse, is the second coming of Christ with the 7 seals. So you can see the 7 seals around him. And let's see, this, we also have Bishop Ecclesiastes. So this is the guy over on the right, is the bishop of the church for this area. And he is holding a little miniature version of San Vitale that he is bringing to present to Christ. Like, I am building this church for you. This is my offering to you. Which I love that when there's like a little model of the church depicted that's being offered. I just think it's kind of sweet. Vitalis is also portrayed. He's the leftmost figure over here, and he is a local saint. So he's the patron saint of this church. So let's see. Let's look at, we have, and you'll notice we have a young Christ here with no beard. So this is the second coming. So he's already been crucified and everything and is coming back. And he's shown as still having some of his humanity, and that he's kind of can be different ages. He has his cruciform halo, which we saw in late antiquity as one of the attributes of Christ. And he's sitting on this orb, which is kind of the orb of the universe. He's still clothed in purple because purple is the color of royalty. Okay, leading up on either side of the apse, we have two large mosaics. This one pictures Justinian. You'll notice he's also wearing purple. He's in the center. He also has a halo, which is kind of strange because he's the emperor. He's not a saint, but he's given a halo in this depiction. He's holding a gold bowl, which would have held the bread for the Eucharist. So the Eucharist is this transfiguration where bread and wine represent the body and blood of Christ in the Christian tradition. So the Eucharist plate is the bread plate, essentially. So that's what Justinian's holding. You'll notice that his guys next to him, his soldier guys, there's a shield. What do we see on the shield? The Chi-Rho. So we see the Christogram is still a symbol that's used by the Byzantine emperors, particularly in their military wear. We also have next to him Maxentius. I think he's the bishop of the church. He's another person who is affiliated with the church, who's portrayed next to him. And then on the other mosaic, we have, oh, there we go, Bishop Maximinius is the other figure. Sorry, I lost his name for a second. On the opposite side, leading up to the apse, we have another mosaic, and this one features Empress Theodora. So this is Empress Theodora, and so she is holding the crater, the goblet that the wine for the Eucharist would be put in, that represents, that turns into, through transfiguration, the blood of Christ during the Eucharist ceremony in Christian rituals. And if you look closely at her gown, which is also purple because of royalty, she has the three magi depicted in the border of her dress, which is to remind people of the kings who bring the gifts to the baby Jesus after he is born. So it's kind of showing that she and Justinian are bringing offerings, bringing these golden Eucharist plate and crater to the church in a similar kind of offering. Theodora was a really important figure. She was Justinian's wife and the empress. She was also his main advisor. One of the historians from and kind of record keepers from their court said that she was the surpassing the intelligence of all men who ever lived. So she supposedly was very, very smart and was very good at strategy. Okay. Let's see. I'm going to go ahead and stop here because I feel like we've gone a little long on this one. So we'll finish up the rest of the early okay, only a couple more slides, so I'm actually not going to stop. I'm just going to finish this out. So another thing that we see, this is in the monastery of St. Catherine in Mount Sinai. So this is in Egypt, which is still part of the empire at this point. Mount Sinai is the original monastery. And here we see another representation of Christ that is popular at this time, and that's when he's in a mandorla. So this is this almond-shaped kind of full body halo almost. And you see this portrayal of Christ quite a lot. It's Christ in majesty. It's also sometimes to represent the second coming of Christ. So he's making the symbol of the blessing with his hand. He has his cruciform halo. Here he has his beard. And this is a pretty common kind of portrayal of him. Okay, let's see. We also have a popularity rising of icons. Icons are individual painted representations of Christ or other holy Christian figures that are for personal prayer. these examples are encaustic on wood. So remember, encaustic is the kind of painting where the pigment is in wax as the carrier instead of oil, like oil painting, for example. Oil painting is not invented until the Renaissance, but anyway. So we have these icons that are very popular for personal use. Then what happens is in 627 we have a bunch of Eastern forces who are Islamic, who are believers in the faith of Islam, who start kind of encroaching on this territory that has been claimed for the Byzantine Empire. I mean, it was the Arab people's land first, but anyway, so the guy who's in charge after several people after Justinian is Leo III. And as there's the rise of these Arabic forces from the east coming in, the Byzantine empire loses 2/3 of its empire, and Leo III thinks that this is has some kind of religious origin, essentially. So he thinks that God is punishing him because of all these icons. So he thinks that because of this, the second commandment that says not to make a graven image or likeness, Leo III, the emperor, decides that it's all of these icons are why they're not doing well, so he bans all icons. And that's called the iconoclasm. Okay, so that's the banning of icons. Iconoclast, it literally means the breaker of images, excuse me. And iconophiles are people who love these images. Okay, so that concludes the early Byzantine. We'll get into the Middle Byzantine next.